at 11:45 in the morning, but Sundays are hard to get used to in Israel, huh? No Sundays here. You start bright and early, but okay. We're learning laws of Kashrut. We're about to actually get down to brass tacks, as they say, and how to kasher a kitchen, how to kasher your dishes. Of course, it's going to be practical. In coming up Pesach, in about a month's time, people will be starting to kasher their dishes. And after we've learned the basic principles and the different types of materials, and even some deeper situations or more deeper understanding of not bar not and special exceptional sharp foods and spills on the sides of the oven from the outside, and how to deal with that, or if you have a spoon which is mixing the and the opposite type, which we covered in last chapter 32. We're up to chapter 32, where we're talking about the actual how to make things kosher. So we going back to the original discussion, we learn out from the Parsha of Midian. When the Jewish people conquered Midian, they took the spoils of war, and the spoils of war included some vessels, and they had to make them kosher. The Torah says, whatever you put in water, put in water. Whatever you put in fire, put in fire. From here we learn out the principle. Maybe it's been a few days, a few weeks, so maybe I'll write it again on the board. Ke bol'o kach polto. Ke bol'o, which means as it absorbs, livloa is to swallow, really. So as it swallows the taste, so polto, so it releases it. I'll use the prettier language than literally it means to spit it out, but releases it. So as it absorbed it, meaning the taste, so it releases it, meaning the taste. So basically, based on the usage. So we have three forms. If you want to get rid of that taste, three ways to get rid of the form. One is washing with cold water. The second one is boiling with boiling hot water. And the third one is called, so first one is hadacha. That means washing or cleaning, or you could even say, literally, it means rinsing. And then haga'ala is for boiling. Basically, through boiling water, you boil out the taste. The taste, just like it was absorbed, it gets released into the boiling hot water. And the last one is called libun. Libun, which means to burn out the taste. The way it's usually explained is that you're not really taking the taste out of the vessel. The taste remains in the vessel, but you heat it up so that it gets burnt to a crisp, or to less than a crisp, to nothingness within the vessel itself. It's not that you're taking it out and then it's going to be mixed up in the boiling hot water like you have in Haggalah. So there's 1, 2, 3 methods of doing what we're talking about here. These three meshes are hachshara. You see the word in there? Kosher? Hachshara. So good English for that is koshering vessels. Hachsharat kelim is what we're doing, what we're talking about now. Hachsharat kelim. This is the principle. As it absorbs it, so it releases it, and what that translates into is these three levels of making things kosher. So if something just got dirty with you used, let's assume now we're talking about treif, non-kosher food. You have by accident you buy some non-kosher chocolate powder. I don't know what they put in there to make it not kosher, but let's say there is some non-kosher ingredient, and so you made some cold chocolate milk, and you stirred it up with your spoon. How do you make kosher again, the spoon and the cup, if you had non-kosher cold chocolate milk? Number one, rinsing and washing. Forget about toveling, that's a whole separate issue. We're not talking about toveling. Let's assume it's owned by a Jew, so you don't have to tovel it. We're talking about the taste that it absorbed. You use it with non-kosher. You got to rinse it off, wash it, make sure that there's no leftover chocolate milk of the non-kosher type on your spoon or on your glass or on your cup or your mug, okay? So that's number one, because it was used with cold. So all you have to do is rinse it off with cold water. However, let's say you had hot chocolate. Ooh. So then you're going to need to use hot water to get the taste out that was absorbed into your mug and into your spoon. You stirred it. We'll get a little more into the details in just a minute. The third, let's say you put the chocolate bar on a baking dish. And the chocolate bar is not kosher. You put it into your oven. And so you have treif on your oven rack or your baking dish, and it was in the oven. So the only way you can get that taste out is by burning out the taste from the oven and from the oven rack. How to do that? That's number three. Burning, we're going to see the details later on. Bezrat Hashem. Nice. If you have a self-cleaning oven, that might do the trick. Yes, Ben? I'll take some questions.
What about if you, let's say, fry something? Like, let's say you fry some pork chops or whatever.
Chas v'chalila, but yeah, it's a good question. Usually you fry things with oil, so it's a debate. Is the oil considered to be liquid, and therefore number two is good enough? Sometimes you fry things without oil, directly into the fry pan, and then you would need libun, and many times the fry pan will be ruined if you put it in that intense heat. And so I've thrown out a few fry pans in my day, but it's a chumrah. There are some people that say it depends on the majority of the use. We're going to get to it in just a few minutes. And the majority of, I think most people, when they fry up, they do use some oil, and some people consider that oil to be considered to be liquid, and therefore you can do hag'ala. Number two, you can do boiling, putting that into a boiling pot of hot water, and that'll kosher your fry pan. But it's a debate, that particular fry pan issue. We'll get back to it, okay? Another question. Someone wanted to say something. So far, we got the basic concepts. We're getting into the details now. These are the three. I just gave you an example of the cold chocolate milk, the hot chocolate milk, and then the chocolate that's in the fire without any milk, without any liquid. And so you would need the third level of burning out the taste from the vessels. Okay, terrific. Now, to make things more complicated, which is what you've all been waiting for, because it can't be just so simple, right? Nekudot, bevakasha. Which words? Ke, bola'o. I'll put it in green, just kach. Kach. Pol, to. What else? Ha-shara. Or in kelim is kelim, vessels. Hadacha. Yeah, it would if it's together. Now I wrote the first word before I put them together. Aksharat kelim, that's called smichut in Hebrew. If you're up to that level of opan, then you'll have learned about when you have two nouns. Aksharat kelim. Okay. Hadacha, hag, ala, and libun. I already have the nekudot. Okay? Yofi. Hala. Hala means onwards. Can I erase this?
No erasing. No.
Okay. Move to the other side of the board then. Here is my beautiful artwork of a nice pot on the fire. Okay? This is called a Kli Rishon. Kli means vessel. Kli Rishon. Rishon, Roman numeral, sorry. Al ha'esh, on the fire. It has the status that we're going to discuss. But then we're going to see there's another status, level 2. Let's say you take, okay, that's another status is when you have Kli Rishon. It's still Kli Rishon. It's the same pot. You just move it off the fire. As you can see here, there's no fire. So this is Kli Rishon also, but it's not Al Ha'esh. This is Al Ha'esh on the fire, and it's Kli Rishon not on the fire. It's the same pot, just moved over. The next stage, usually what happens is that you pour the food out of this pot. Here's our pot. It's now having liquid pouring out onto, let's say, into a bowl, okay? And here's our Kli Rishon. It's the same one. It's from here. And the water gets poured out into this is going to be called a Kli Sheni. Right? This is a second vessel. In other words, it's not on the fire. It's not even close to the fire. It's not the same vessel that it was cooked in. It's a second vessel. And then you could go on and on forever and ever. You could pour it into a third vessel and into a fourth vessel, right? So then, the next thing would be Kli Shlishi, and so on and so forth. So what's the status of these, and why is this important? What's going on here? What's going on is that the rabbis defined, and it sounds like what they were going by was they were trying to set up a system that's true in most cases. What is the halacha regarding the heat that we can assume is retained in all these different stages and how far they're removed from the cooking process? The assumption, of course, is in stage number 1, we're going to have transfer of taste from the food, non-kosher food, into the vessel, and from the but as you go on, the taste, the heat is less. Take it off the fire, it still retains some heat, but usually, very quickly it'll cool down once it's off the fire. So that's going to be, a increasing level of heat the closer you are to the fire, and therefore a decreasing level of heat the farther you are removed from it, decreasing heat. So here there's less heat. What's the status? Is there still enough heat to effect transfer of taste? What about this stage? Here you have the same food that's in the vessel, but now it's being poured into a second vessel. That pouring, does that still effect the transfer of taste? Is it going to make this vessel non-kosher, for example? If it's non-kosher soup, is that taste going to transfer into a Kli Sheni? This, by the way, is called irui, another Hebrew word, which means, till today, pouring. When you go to the when you go to the hospital, that is a you.
Oh, donating blood?
When you go to the hospital, chas v'chalila, and you need an infusion, it's called an irui, because they stick a needle into your vein and they give you liquids. with irui. They're pouring liquid into your veins. So it's pouring. Irui means pouring. Question is, what's the halachic status of the poured hot liquid? It's still hot. It was on the fire. It boiled, but now it's a little bit far removed from the fire. Even more than not being on the fire, it's being poured out of the vessel. So maybe the heat of the first vessel retains its heat while it's in the vessel, but once it's poured out of the vessel, you can imagine that it's going to get cooling off even more. And then, of course, if you pour it another time into a third vessel, then it's going to even be cooler and cooler. Bottom line is the sages defined these stages. And the stages, they said, are as follows. The halacha is very clear. If you stick a spoon, or the pot itself here, in stage number 1, for sure there's transfer of taste here. If you put a spoon into the soup, the non-kosher soup, the spoon is absorbing non-kosher taste. The pot absorbs non-kosher taste. It's going to need, what's it going to need? 1, 2, or 3? Hagalah, that's right. It absorbs taste through water, so you're going to need hagalah both on the spoon and on the pot. Of course, you remember that it's not only for non-kosher food. We're coming close to Pesach. All of our dishes, we assume that they absorb chametz taste. We want to get rid of the chametz from the dishes before we use them, so we put them through this kashering process for Pesach, unless you have separate dishes for Pesach. Some people are very amazing. Yeah. Many people do. Yeah.
In the case of separate dishes, what do you do with the old dishes? You put them on the side.
Put them on the side. Don't use them for the 7 days. That's it.
Take them up.
That's right.
You don't need to clean them mid-yard, but.
So that's a good question. If there's some leftover chametz, you should clean it up. But the absorbed taste, you don't have to worry about. Why? Why don't we have to worry about the absorbed taste? It's in the chametz. It's in the pot. It's in the pot. Why don't you worry about it? What did we learn?
24 hours.
That's it. What's that called? It's only potent when it's ben yomo, within 24 hours. If it's for the same day, so comes to, as long as you don't cook for 24 hours before Pesach, all the chametz residue or taste, which is in your chametz dik, that's a Yiddishism, the chametz dik pots, that's not potent anymore, so don't use it, but you don't have to kasher
If
it.
I don't want to use it, I only simply clean and put it inside.
Clean and put it away. It becomes complicated because if you were to sell it to a non-Jew, what's the problem? Now you could talk about, what did you say, what? No. You sell it before the holiday starts. That's it. When you buy it back, it'll be owned by a non-Jew for 7 days, so you have to put it in the mikvah. That's the other halacha, which we're not talking about. The halachas of tvilat kelim. Some people say it could get you into trouble to sell your chametz dik pots to a non-Jew. So don't sell them, because you might have to put them in the mikvah. So just put them clean, make sure they're clean, and put them aside. And they can have all the chametz dik taste in them. It's meaningless. Just use a Pesach dik pot. But if you don't have 2 sets of pot, not everybody's so rich. So you kasher. Well, you see, everything's relative. Some people are even less rich than you, and they don't have 2 sets of dishes. Yeah, question, Yossi, go ahead.
It's a bit of a stupid question. But
Good. I love stupid questions. Because if it's really stupid, I get to make fun of you. No. I don't make fun. Please. Yeah.
The idea of Kiddush is that after it's past like a third vessel, it can't really cook anything anymore, right?
Right.
Right. So what if you kept the vessels heated at a certain temperature? Because then the water itself wouldn't decrease as much.
Right.
You'd be able to then use it for some method of cooking anyways.
It's a good question.
There's still one pure shot. If you keep heating, there's still.
No, but there was no food in it at the time. So Yossi's asking a good question. The truth is there is a machloket. We ask this question often regarding Shabbat. Because on Shabbat the question is, can you make coffee or tea? I mean, I make all my tea from before Shabbat, just to be careful. But some people don't do that. They want to make their coffee fresh. on Shabbat. Wait, you can't cook on Shabbat. So cook it. You're cooking your tea and cooking your coffee. It's a big problem. So someone suggested that, you know what we should do? We should just transfer the hot water off the fire into a second vessel. Usually you have an urn. If you remember last week we called it in Hebrew, Menachem, right? It's a cool word. There's the word heat in there and mayim in there. Mayim, chamim, meicham. It's cool. Modern Hebrew word. Anyways, you take it out you pour it into a cup, right? There's a little tap there. What's this? This would be Kli Sheni. Pour it from Kli Rishon into Kli Sheni. Still a problem that most people assume that Kli Sheni has the power to cook some things. You want to be safe. Pour it out of the Kli Sheni, out of your first mug that you take the water in, into a Kli Shlishi. And Kli Shlishi doesn't cook. Put your tea bag or your coffee into a Kli Shlishi. That's what Rav Moshe Feinstein, based on the Pri Megadim, says, that's what you should do on Shabbat if you want to make coffee or tea. Always put it in a Kli Shlishi. I'll finish and then I'll take questions. So, other people say, though, there's the Shita, there's the opinion of other commentators. The Re'im says, what are you talking about? This standard that it gets cooler and cooler and cooler, that's usually true. But if you take a thermometer and you put it into the Kli Shlishi and you see that it has the requisite heat, it's called Yad Soledet Bo. Translates usually nowadays into 45 degrees Fahrenheit. Celsius. That's very hot. But sometimes it can happen. So then it has the power to cook, even on the Kli Shlishi, and even if it's in the thousandths vessel. You keep pouring. I don't care. Bottom line is it hot or not hot? That's an opinion, and that's why I make all my tea and coffee from before Shabbat, if possible. There's other considerations. We'll talk about that in the laws about Shabbat. But most people assume that if it's in Kli Shlishi, it's very popular heter. Moshe Feinstein made it popular by saying that if you pour your hot water into a third vessel, you can put your tea bag in there and don't worry about it. And even if it's very hot, we have a system. The system was devised by the sages for the standard cases, and therefore they defined anything past Kli Sheni, anything Kli Shlishi and more. It's not called halachic cooking. Even if it really is very hot, doesn't matter. If it's a Kli Shlishi, you can cook as much as you want in a Kli Shlishi. You don't have to worry because halachically the sages defined it as not cooking. Against what you might see in reality, this is a halachic formalistic definition. So this is a debate, whether we go by the formalistic side of things or by the actual testing. But there's definitely who to rely on when it says that when you get to this, so far removed from the fire, it's been defined as not cooking. We're going to see that this question, whether we're actually going by reality or by the definitions of Chazal, comes up again in just a moment. But first I want to take Hirsch's question, and then I'll continue further. Yeah, go ahead. Yes.
He talks about this stuff as well. And you put it into like a third thing, it's fine.
Exactly. Yafeh Ma'od. Very good. Excellent. It's a great book. Shmirat Shabbat Kilchata.
Does that mean you can cook couscous on Shabbos, for example? Because that cooks even at a very room temperature.
I know it's only for like
Both tea and coffee are cooked, so there's no.
Most tea is not cooked, but most people assume it's cooked.
Actually, no.
Yes.
Tea, the leaves
Tea.
are like baked or whatever.
Not necessarily. It really depends. Yeah. Yes, sir.
Ramen.
Good question.
It's allowed.
It's a good question. It's a good question. It really depends. Some people say third vessel, no problem.
Ramen is cooked, it's just dried.
Right. That's recooking something that's been dried, reconstituting, rehydrating. Right. So this is not a class on Hilchot Shabbat. I don't want to get into all those details, but it's a question. Let's go back to the laws of kashering though. When it comes to laws of kashering, let's say you have. So again, let's go back. If you put a spoon into the first vessel, it needs proper haga'ala, because we assume it absorbed the taste. What happens if you put it in a kli rishon, not on the fire? So it's one step removed from the most severe case. Most people assume kibal'o kach polto. You can kasher it also by putting it in a boiling pot of water, even if the pot is not on the fire. You parallel, you just do one for one. And what about if something was poured onto your spoon or onto your dish? This dish now has non-kosher taste in it, but it's only on the level of pouring. I'll give you a good example of that. That is maybe your sink. Nobody cooks in the sink. You can't put a fire in your sink, really. What the worst that could happen is you could have non-kosher taste that's poured into your sink, right? If you had non-kosher food and someone before you, not you, of course, but the previous resident, the previous tenant in the house, he didn't keep kosher. Maybe he poured non-kosher food into the sink. How do you kasher the sink?
Wait, why do you have to?
One second. Because it absorbed non-kosher taste on this level.
Okay, but will it absorb, give that taste to something else?
Yes, the assumption is yes. So the answer is you kasher that, but it doesn't matter. We don't use non-kosher dishes, whether or not it's going to give over the taste. We said even after 24 hours, even after 24 million years, Moshe wanted me to say. Right? Even though the taste is not potent, we have a rule, we don't use non-kosher dishes in a kosher kitchen. So you have a non-kosher sink there. You can't put your kosher dishes in a non-kosher sink. The answer is you kasher it. How do you kasher it? The same way it absorbed the taste, by pouring boiling hot water onto it. You pour boiling hot water onto it from a kli rishon, and we'll discuss exactly the details of how to do that. And kibolo kach poto, same principle. The way it absorbed the taste, that's the way you get it out. You don't have to go higher to a higher level. And the kli shlishi, if kli shlishi doesn't have the power to absorb any taste or to cause any taste, so you just wash it. It goes back to number one. Mm-hmm. You just wash it out, and you don't have to kasher it at all. You don't have to do number 2 or 3. Yes, Moshe?
So actually, a question about non-kosher vessels. Am I allowed to benefit from a non-kosher vessel, and even if it's in food? So if I have just this random old bowl that I got from the thrift store, and I know it's not kosher, but I just set it in the center of the table so that people can spit the husks from sunflower.
More than that, you can put fruit in there. You could use it for your change. You could use it, yeah, because you're not using it for hot food. For hot food, you wouldn't be allowed to use it.
Even for eating breakfast cereal with milk, I could use a non-kosher bowl. Provided that it was
not ideal. You shouldn't, because of what I told Ben before. That we tried, but for fruit, mm-hmm. for fruit that is, has a peel on it, and it's just like a holding device. It's not quite. You're using it as a dish to eat. But if you are going to use, I wouldn't. Yeah, technically you would be able to eat cereal from it, cold cereal, from a non-kosher dish, but it's frowned upon. If you have nothing else, you can rely on it, because of course there's not going to be transfer of taste.
We were talking about hotel,
in your own home, right? If you're in a hotel, chutz laaretz, and you want to have,
the milk's kosher. You're confident the breakfast cereal is kosher.
If you know, then yes, you can use that dish. As a matter of fact, I remember way back when I was dating in Canada and in New York, there was till today, it's quite common that you date when you're religious, right? So you're not.
You meet in a hotel lobby.
You go to a hotel lobby, and you order something. You're sitting there, it's nice enough, yes. So some people order an orange juice, a Coke, whatever it is. But can you order coffee? Can you have tea? Those dishes, those mugs, they're not Jews. There's no Kashrut certification on the non-Jewish hotel there. In Israel, most of the hotels are kosher, so it's not really a question. But so there's a rabbi that supervises them. The answer was, in most cases, yes. Those mugs are used almost exclusively for tea or coffee, which are always kosher, and there's no problem. And so you can have a coffee in a non-kosher hotel lobby, and even if they wash them, so what? There's soap. There's not. Anyways, there's room to be lenient, although it's not ideal. So it's saying whenever you have to, if you have a kosher institution where you can privately date and get to know your shidduch date, that's better. But technically, it is kosher. Yes, Moshe.
Would I order coffee on an airplane, especially today, now that they use paper cups? Is that generally considered okay?
Most plain coffee is no kashrut problem.
Milk, if you're gonna add milk, make sure it's milk.
Right, milk in most Western countries is kosher. Again, there's an issue of Chalav Yisrael, but assuming that you're not going to worry about Chalav Yisrael.
Halal, can you?
Halal is all kosher.
Halal is kashrut certification, yeah. But another question, Ben, yeah.
So, is there any in these like criterion for in these different specific situations? Is there any like consideration of the fact that like of what sort of Rav Melamed and Rav the one in Hebron said that like there's no actual transfer of taste practically?
Most rabbis don't hold from that. But there are practical ramifications, of course, in specific situations. It's once it's been stated by a halachic authority, it's something that you can add many times when we build up a case, like a legal case for any legal argument in the court of law. You say, I have 6 reasons why if you're a lawyer, why my client should get off. And same thing in halacha. We many times put forth a number of arguments about why, the case is that it's kosher or not kosher. And this could be added as one of the factors, although relying on that only as the only factor is a little bit on the edge there. Of course, Rabbi Melamed, he also, it doesn't apply it across the board, but he's and he has the right to do that. But I don't think most poskim rely on that alone. If there's other factors, like it's after Ben Yomo, and you could make a case. You can make a case.
Situation where like the coffee might have been with other dishes or something. We don't really know, but like part of the consideration is also, does this actually taste like anything else? Is there any actual
Yeah, and we could assume that it's not within 24 hours and doesn't the taste doesn't last or does not remain potent after 24 hours. Ben Yomo, as we saw, right? So you can build a case to rely on it. You don't have to rely only on Rav Melamed's idea about the cleanliness and the idea of not absorbing taste. Although mugs are not quite metal. He spoke about metal, right? And glass, metal and glass. But mugs that are basically the earthenware that are just covered with a thin layer of enamel or porcelain or some kind of glaze, that I don't even know if Rav Melamed would allow that. If you actually had a mug or a bowl, an earthenware bowl that was used with non-kosher soup, I don't think it has the same halacha as a mug, which is primarily used for tea and coffee, not for anything else. Although sometimes people do use a mug for soup. But that's really the next topic, which we're going to have to cover tomorrow, which is, do we follow one time? Okay, usually I use my knife and my fork on my plate to cut my fruits and vegetables and cut my steak, but it's not on the fire. One time, though, I took my knife and I was making a barbecue and I needed to turn over the steak. It happened to be non-kosher steak. No, but let's say, it's just making up a case now, right? So you're using the fork on the fire. You would need libun. It's absorbing taste directly on the fire. You have non-kosher, there's no liquid involved there. And so now my fork, 9 times out of 10, I use it basically in a kli shlishi situation where it's not going to be any heat left when you're eating your steak on your plate. Even if it is, it's been transferred from the fire onto, it's not a kli rishon or kli sheni. So usually my fork is used in a kli shlishi. It shouldn't need any to kasher it. All it would need would be to clean it, number one. Maybe if you want to say that it's kli sheni, so you put it in boiling hot water. Do I have to put it in fire? Because your fork could get ruined if you put it actually in the fire. So do we follow the majority of use, or even the one-time use makes it absorb taste, and then it's forever going to be in there? You can't use it for kosher food until you get rid of it by doing libun. This is an interesting question, isn't it? I leave you in suspense until tomorrow morning. Same time, same place. We will continue and discuss this topic.